Hey FROMily, it's Julie B. Deep Dives, and today I'm diving into the next installment of my FROMily Town meeting series. We have a lot to discuss after the events of Episode 9, Revelations Chapter 1. At the center of it all is the search for Fatima, who is being held prisoner by Elgin in the root cellar and getting ready to birth some nefarious entity. Most of the town pairs off to form a search party, which is pretty comically ineffective, but I have to admit, at least there was actual progress with communication between multiple characters in this episode. But they still aren't sharing everything that they should be, of course. It's the penultimate episode of Season 3. Stick around for my final predictions for the finale and who I think will not survive. But without further ado, let's get into it. While it may not have always been obvious, the overarching goal of the Big Bad this season has always been to break Boyd. The season opened with a food shortage that was most certainly manufactured to force him into a desperate situation, followed by an ambush which led to the death of Tian Shen while he was forced to watch helplessly. The goal was to push Boyd closer to his breaking point and shake the town's faith in him, and once that was achieved, the very next day a bunch of new crops appeared as if by magic by the old cabin settlement. You see, it has never been just about killing these people. The Big Bad doesn't want to actually starve them right now. And I think it could take them all out at any time, talismans or no talismans. The talismans give them the illusion of safety, that's all. The goal is to drag out their suffering as long as possible, feeding on their fear and pain until they're all finally broken, before finishing them off. In a second ambush this season, the monsters forced Boyd to choose between saving Tabitha, Jim, and Henry on the ambulance, or saving Randall alone. Randall survived, but sustained wounds that will leave permanent scars. Just to shove it in Boyd's face that once again, he was put in an impossible situation, and this is another thing that will weigh on his conscience, as a man with a huge savior complex. Now, Boyd believes that this place is trying to break him by doing it through hurting his daughter-in-law and son. Ellis tells him that this isn't his fault, but Boyd is absolutely right that Fatima was targeted for this reason, in my opinion. And meanwhile, his Parkinson's is rendering him more handicapped. As if to confirm his suspicion and troll him, the nurse creature calls out to him from outside the window, asking, "You okay in there, Boyd?" Of course, he's triggered and looks out the window, pointing his gun at her as she makes a finger gun motion at her head, as if to tell him to just give up and unalive himself. This place is definitely targeting him. This was confirmation. That's why Fatima was chosen. Now, at least Boyd finally tells Ellis the truth, though, about his Parkinson's, and shares what the monsters said to him before they murdered Tian Shen. So that's progress here. 1 point for productive communication. Meanwhile, Elgin insists to Fatima that he's trying to protect her and she's not a prisoner, despite the fact that he won't let her leave. Fatima says that this thing inside her isn't good and won't do good things. But Elgin says it only made her stab Tilly because it was hungry and scared. She needs to consume more blood, and somehow he's convinced that when the baby arrives, they'll all be able to go home. He points out that the baby already helped them once. Finding out that she was pregnant caused him to remember his dream of the cicada nursery rhyme, which led to the chain of events that helped Boyd figure out how to stop the cicada entity in Season 2. But that's taking a logical leap. We don't really know exactly how that works, if that really saved the town or just unleashed a new threat. Smashing the music box may have actually made this entity in Fatima stronger, and I don't believe this entity is anything good. Fatima gives in and gulps down the blood, and in a short time, her pregnancy has finally accelerated, something I had predicted would happen before the season began. She tries to escape by attacking Elgin with a piece of metal from her bed frame, but only manages to slash his hand. And in an unexpected development, Fatima finds a metal hatch under the dirt floor. She pulls on it but can't open it, and I'm guessing it will lead into the creature's cave. And then the kimono lady appears, making this shush motion, and pins her down on the bed, covering her mouth so that no one could hear her, as Victor and later Tabitha enter the root cellar. So this is a non-human entity here, of course, but she's still somehow able to interact with the physical world. I discussed all of Tabitha and Victor's scenes in depth in this episode, in my video, The Origins of Tabitha Revealed. Check that out for my take on that bombshell reveal of Tabitha getting back Miranda's memories, which I interpret to mean that Tabitha has been confirmed as reincarnated Miranda. But moving on, Sara manages to glue most of the pieces to her snowman ornament back together that Kenny had smashed, her prized possession that her late brother had made for her. Earlier this season, she was arranging the broken pieces and told Victor, "I don't think I'll ever be able to put it back together, but I like to try." This is a perfect, elegant metaphor for herself, a broken person who will never be whole again. Now she's managed to put most of it back together, but fittingly, there is a piece missing where the heart would be, symbolic of herself without her brother. When she finishes with it, she's immediately targeted by the voices in her head as she clutches her head in pain. It's as if gluing the ornament back together somehow triggered it. That ornament could be like a relic with her energy attached to it. Certain personal possessions of individuals here seem to carry power that we have yet to figure out exactly. Sara later tells Boyd that she heard the voices for the first time since the ruins and says that Fatima didn't leave on her own. Something took her. They want you to know that she's close and she's afraid. They were laughing because they know you won't find her in time. They want you to know that you can't save her. Now the question is, to whom is they referring? Who or what are these voices in her head? I think of the big bad as a single entity controlling all the lower entities like the cicada entity and the monsters, the tip of the spear. But maybe she's hearing more than one voice, like the voices that told her to kill Toby. Are these evil spirits? It can't be the voices of the dead who seem to be trying to help, as the Abby voice in her head seemed to be helping in season 1 when it warned Boyd that there are things out there in the forest worse than the monsters. These voices in Sara's head were laughing and want Boyd to know he can't save Fatima. So they definitely don't sound like good entities, and that is also evidence that the kimono lady is not on the side of good and has tricked Elgin into believing that she is, that Fatima will be all right. I figured this a long time ago, that she's definitely manipulating him. Also, it's possible that these voices have seen the future and have already known that Boyd will not be able to save Fatima. Hence, they say they know he can't find her in time. As we saw with Julie throwing the rope to Boyd in the dungeon dream state, time may not move in a linear way here. But moving on, Jim undergoes major character growth all of a sudden in this episode. Even when Julie tells him she was in the woods with Randall, he doesn't fly off the handle with his usual anger issues. I think of all the touching family moments for Jim in this episode are a red flag, but more on that later. Jim goes to talk to Randall, but before he gets there, Randall is triggered by the cicadas again. He's looking at a mirror at his wounds. Once again, the theme of mirrors popping up, which I've discussed before. People are always looking in mirrors here when they're either suffering in this place or connected to an evil entity in some way. In terms of suffering, of course, Boyd screamed into a mirror in season 1, letting out all of his pent-up angst. And in this season, Donna sobbed in front of a mirror, breaking down with Boyd. This whole place, in my opinion, is like a kind of a mirror world, an upside-down version of our world that's full of deception, something that the mirrors symbolize. A pocket dimension that very closely mirrors our own. So it's fitting that people are always breaking down in front of mirrors or looking into them when they're being deceived or used by an evil entity. The Jasmine monster looked into this one in Colony House in season 1 after she said she didn't choose to be this way and killed Kevin. This season, Fatima looked into the same mirror while this evil entity inside her was making her sicker and sicker. And then Elgin recently looked into it while he was doing this evil kimono lady's bidding. And this is the second time Randall has looked into a mirror at the wound he got from the monsters. Anyway, Randall touches the wound on his cheek and it seems to trigger one of his fake cicada attacks. Except, this time he doesn't see them, but only hears them, and the sound seems to be so loud that he clutches his head and stumbles around in pain. But when Jim shows up, it just stops. This is different from his other attacks, and it's unclear why. Usually he can see the cicadas, he swats at the air, rolls around on the ground, etc. and it even sometimes happens in front of others like Julie and Boyd. So it's odd that Jim's arrival seems to make it stop, but worth noting, and maybe the reason for this change will become clearer later. Jim exhibits more growth here by not flipping out on Randall for taking Julie to the woods and trying to teach her to drive. He actually asks for Randall's insight into what could be going on with Julie since he was in the same cicada coma. Randall says he didn't want to return to the ruins with her because it just felt wrong, and he can't explain why. But he says that Jim should just teach Julie how to drive because there's nothing else that he can do about their predicament. He says the chilling statement, "None of us are getting out of here alive." Jim says he doesn't accept that. I believe this is just one moment that foreshadows what I think will be Jim's impending demise in the season finale, and more to come on that later in the episode. I don't think Randall is right, though, that none of them will get out of there alive. He seems to have emerged from the cicada coma with some wisdom and insight about fates worse than death here, but I don't think he's right on this one. And was it really a bad move for Julie to enter the ruins? Randall said it felt wrong to go there. But what if there's something Randall is supposed to do in there, and Marielle too? If Julie was being drawn there to fulfill that purpose of throwing the rope to Boyd in a paradoxical time loop, then what could Randall need to do there that he's neglecting? Some fans believe that Martin, the man chained up in the dungeon, is actually Randall. Could it be that it feels wrong for him to go there because he's going to end up chained up in there? It's hard to make sense of this, though, because Randall doesn't have a marine tattoo like Martin. Still, it's something to think about. Maybe there's a reason why it feels wrong to him, that something bad will happen to him if he does enter those ruins. Jim showed more growth with Tabitha as well in this episode. He stopped invalidating her ideas and feelings, pledging to her his full support with her quest to figure out what her mission to save the children means. He definitely took Henry's advice to shut up and listen to his wife, not to try to fix her because she isn't broken. I think it worked coming from Henry because Tabitha was once Miranda, in my opinion, Henry's wife. If anyone is qualified to give Jim advice on this, it would be Henry. With the diner newly reopened and Bacta running it, the Matthews family has a meal together for the first time in a while. Julie is still cynical about it, but Jim is really trying to do better as a husband and father in this episode. And later, while looking for Fatima, Jim and Ethan visit the RV, and Jim has a heartfelt talk with Ethan, who blames himself for what happened to Julie at the ruins. A recurring theme in this episode is guilt. Boyd blames himself for what's happening to Fatima since the monsters were trying to break him, and now Ethan blames himself for Julie going into a seizure because he encouraged her to go into the ruins. Jim opens up about his own guilt to Ethan about the accident when they first arrived in town, how he never would have forgiven himself if he lost Ethan like he lost Thomas. He carries the constant burden of guilt for Thomas tragically falling off his changing table and losing his life as a young baby. As for the car accident, Ethan tells Jim that it wasn't his fault because he was scared and doing the best he could. Jim tells Ethan that the same thing applies to him and Julie. He said that things happen here, things we can't control. This place wants us to blame ourselves. It wants us to be scared. You have to remember that we're all doing our best, even when bad things happen, especially when bad things happen. It's how we face those things. That's what matters. Not the decisions we make or whose fault it was, but how we take care of each other and how we always do our best no matter what. You understand? I love you, buddy. Now, what a speech that was. What a speech. It's dripping with foreshadowing that, in my opinion, Jim is going to lose his life in the season finale. I mean, after making many mistakes with his family, he had so many touching family moments in this one episode and makes amends with every family member. And now he's reminiscing and imparting this important wisdom to Ethan that he'll always carry with him. These are red flags that the show is setting up a shocking demise for him. Not only that, but the things he said to Ethan could foreshadow that Ethan might even blame himself for Jim's death in some way, that Jim might die saving Ethan. Either that, or it just sounds like the perfect parting piece of loving wisdom for Ethan to carry with him as he faces all the challenges that this place will bring, reminding himself not to blame himself when bad things happen as long as he always does his best. So I'd say Jim is near the top of the likely death list for the finale, along with Fatima. Before they leave the RV, just as I predicted in a past video, the fake Thomas voice finds a new way to communicate via the police radio, after Jim had ripped the phone off the wall in his house and it couldn't call anymore. First, it used the old act, saying, "Dad, are you there? Dad, please don't leave me alone here." Ethan didn't even flinch at this and just told Jim, "You were right, it's not him, it's not Thomas." As they go and leave, the voice changes to a taunting tone and says, "Where are you going, Dad?" with an evil chuckle. This is more expert level trolling by the evil entity, like the nurse monster taunting Boyd outside the window earlier in the episode. And of course, who can forget the jukebox playing Celebrate Good Times for Kenny right after he learned about his mother's demise. There is some serious trolling going on by the entity in this season. So, who else is on my likely death list? Fatima is the most likely contender. Elgin is so sure that she'll be okay, but I think he's wrong. For the second time this season, we got a sentimental flashback in this episode to Fatima from season 1. Donna is thinking back to Fatima's anniversary party on the night of the Colony House massacre. We see Fatima standing and smiling in her favorite sweater, yellow, of course, which I think symbolizes hope in this show, as it does in Western cultures in general. Fatima was the embodiment of a ray of light and a beacon of hope in such a dark place back then, telling Julie that if you climb high enough, even a nightmare can look like a dream. At her party that night, she gave her yellow sweater away to Trudy, who immediately got murdered by the monsters. I believe that is symbolic of Fatima's hope being murdered that night, because she was never the same after the events of that night. The massacre traumatized her, and then an evil entity used her as a vessel, so her persona has become consumed with darkness. So again, it looks to me that Fatima won't survive this season. She could either be killed off, or she could even turn into a monster of some kind after she births whatever entity is inside her. That option is still not completely off the table. Everyone had just assumed that either she's turning into a monster or she is birthing some kind of a monster, but you never know. It could actually end up being both. Anyway, Donna tells Boyd she won't tell anyone what Fatima did after all, because of what she means to this place. She doesn't think that they could take it. I think that's why the big bad targeted her in the first place, because she was a figure of hope for all of Colony House. And, of course, to break Boyd. Boyd gathers the whole town together for a meeting to tell them Fatima is missing, giving a rousing speech, a battle cry declaring that they proved this place couldn't break them when they found the talismans, and now they need to prove it again and take their lives back. They pair off and go off looking for Fatima, although their search party is woefully ineffective. They all kind of just wander around and have their own unrelated conversations, barely even looking for her. This place is effective at disorienting people and making them so distracted by their own issues that they aren't good at working together as a group toward a common cause. And I really think that's the objective. Elgin volunteers to search with Ellis. He acts extremely sketchy and downplays the seriousness of Fatima's disappearance, suggesting they might be worried over nothing, and maybe Fatima is somewhere just doing something that will help them all. Elgin actually communicates in a way that people don't normally do on this show. He admits that ever since he had a dream on the bus on the way to town, he's felt like something has been trying to talk to him. I've always thought that there was more to that dream than what he remembered at the end of season 2. It couldn't just be the boy in white reciting the cicada nursery rhyme to him. That wouldn't make him wake up and be so terrified that he would panic and have a visceral reaction, throwing up at the sight of the place. He definitely recognized it. It had to be a premonition dream, and he must have seen something horrible related to Fatima's pregnancy that he just can't remember. Incidentally, he specifically says that he had the dream on the way to town, not when the bus was already in town. I think that confirms what I have already believed, that he had the premonition dream before he arrived in town, which means another character has received a message related to FROMville before their arrival. Not just Miranda, not just Tabitha with her dream as a child. This place can definitely reach out to people, even on the outside. Elgin insists to Ellis, "You're not going to lose Fatima. It's not going to come to that. She's going to be okay. This might be a good thing, the baby and everything. Maybe we don't have all the information yet." And yeah, it's true. They don't have all the information yet, but I think all signs point to this being an evil entity. I still think that Elgin is exhibiting blind faith here, and he's wrong. This so-called baby is not a good thing. Compelling Fatima to drink blood and stab a woman in the heart can't be a sign of a good entity. So I don't think Fatima is going to be okay either. After hearing all this, Ellis finally starts giving him a strange look, and I'd say he needs to start asking some serious questions in the next episode. I think other people are going to start looking at him and questioning him too. Some foreshadowing might be occurring here as well. Ellis tells Elgin, "I already lost my mom. If something happens to Fatima, when she died, the way she died, I can't go through that again. I won't." Referring to his mother. Could this be foreshadowing that he will be forced to kill Fatima like Boyd had to kill Abby? I personally can't imagine Ellis having the strength to do what Boyd did. He doesn't have the same level of emotional maturity and strength. Since Ellis said, "I won't," maybe it means he might be put in that kind of position, but he'll refuse to kill her, even if it means she will cause others' deaths or even his own death. That would certainly break Boyd if he loses Ellis. There could be more foreshadowing in Boyd's conversation with Kenny on their search, too. He admits that his Parkinson's is getting worse and implores Kenny to take over for him if he becomes unable to lead or dies. Boyd says that he's got a clock ticking on him, and it just started ticking a little faster. That sounds like foreshadowing, but I can't imagine Boyd dying until the series finale, the end of the entire series. So I think it just represents that he won't make it out of this series alive, and I think he will probably go out as a hero in the series finale. Not the end of this season, but the end of the entire series. And the last piece of foreshadowing comes with Tabitha and Julie's conversation as they look around Victor's peach truck for Fatima. But again, no one is really focused on actually finding Fatima at all. But hey, at least they're all finally talking to each other and sharing information. They just picked the wrong time to do it. There's no sense of urgency to this search party. Anyway, Julie actually admits to her mother everything that she saw when she went into the dungeon ruins, and that she doesn't actually think it was a dream as she had told Christy. Finally, communication. And here we go with the foreshadowing again. Julie said when she was in that dream state, she kept thinking, "What if I'm lost and no one ever finds me? What if I'm alone now?" Tabitha responds, "You're not alone. You'll never, never be alone here, okay?" Now, what is this foreshadowing? I think once again, it's foreshadowing Jim's demise. Julie will still have her mom and Ethan. She'll never be alone there. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't discuss Jade and Henry's part in this episode as well, of course. Jade is oblivious to Fatima's disappearance, having ignored the call for a meeting and deciding to do another of his thought experiments instead, making a bottle tree next to the bar. This kind of thing helps him think, like when he smashed a bunch of glass bottles and made a giant symbol on the floor of the bar in season 2. Jade climbs a ladder and sees none other than Christopher and Jasper the dummy in a new vision. He's unimpressed at first, saying, "Try something new because this is not working anymore." But comically, no sooner does he say that than Jasper pulls out the same trick he did to Jade in his season 2 vision, letting out the same scream as his vision of the man under the boulder. And Jade nearly falls off the ladder from fright. So clearly the visions are still effective even when they're redundant like this. Henry shows up and asks Jade to join him in searching for Fatima, but he really just wants to talk to Jade about Victor. Again, this is the worst search party ever. Anyway, Henry tells Jade he reminds him of Victor because Victor was yelling at a dummy and Jade was yelling at somebody only he could see. Henry says he feels like he's starting over with a different person, and Jade said, well, that's because he is. Henry asks what Jade would want his dad to say if he showed up and saw him like this. And Jade responds, interestingly, that first of all, he'd want to know where he'd been all his life. Jade goes on to tell Henry, "You're trying to figure out how to fix him, but you can't because he's not broken. Victor is the product of what this place made him. Victor has been surviving here for decades. He's been shaped by this place." Jade compares Victor to Tarzan, growing up in the jungle, and tells Henry he's just making Victor feel foolish for not knowing how to use a fork. This is fantastic insight, and an example of why I love the character of Jade. Despite his lack of social skills and tact, he is actually so wise and empathetic toward others. He understands Victor in a way that no one else does other than Tabitha. And it reminds me of the nature versus nurture concept, what he's talking about, the way that people are shaped. Is it the way we're born, or is it the way we're raised and influenced by our environment that makes us who we are? It's a combination of both, but nurture seems to be stronger. This is why Victor is emotionally stunted to the age of a child. He's been in survival mode since he was a child. There's no way to reverse all that damage. It's just part of who he is now. Henry feels the need to fix him, like he said he tried to do with Miranda, but Victor isn't broken. And this new insight about Jade growing up without a father helps to explain why Jade is the way he is, lacking in social skills and manic all the time. We learned in season 1 that he was raised by his grandmother and lost her at the age of 12, so something must have happened to his mother as well. This could explain why Jade is so different from Victor's description of Christopher, even though I believe Jade is the reincarnation of Christopher. Jade was molded by his upbringing, and Christopher's upbringing must have been different because he was known for making everyone laugh, and he entertained the kids in town with his dummy. Jade is not good with kids at all, and definitely doesn't make people laugh in town. Only us, the viewers, of course. The last thing I'll touch on here is Donna's talk with Acosta during the search party. Once again, Acosta gets up in somebody's face, yet again, accusing Donna of withholding information and saying she can be an asset to the place. She wants to know why they're all trusting Sara when she may have killed both Tilly and Fatima. Donna says that Sara is connected to this place in ways that they don't understand. Acosta makes a reference to the voices in Sara's head, so someone apparently filled her in about that off camera. During the town meeting, Boyd doesn't tell everyone that he got the information on Fatima from Sara's voices, but apparently more communication seems to be happening off screen. And Donna promises to fill Acosta in when they've found Fatima. Now, my predictions for the finale. Jim is at the top of my list for likeliest to die, unfortunately, followed by Fatima. And they may very well both go, the two of them. I don't think that they will get to Fatima in time to save her, but they will discover that the hatch in the secret room leads to the creature's cave, I think. Losing Fatima, or possibly even Ellis, in a horrific way, could bring Boyd to his breaking point. Elgin is likely to lose his life as well. He is expendable once he completes the task he was definitely drawn here to do, to prepare this monstrous baby nursery and imprison Fatima there in preparation for the birth of some evil entity. The big bad uses people however it can, and Elgin seems to be a young man of strong faith. He told Julie earlier this season that his grandma taught him that angels are actually terrifying to look at, but he should fear not. So since he's willing to have faith, the big bad is exploiting it, in my opinion, through the kimono lady, promising to save everyone if he blindly follows her instructions. I don't think Elgin is an evil person at all, as creepy as he acts in this episode. He genuinely seems to believe that he is helping. But like Sara, he is being duped, and it's clear now why Victor said he didn't trust him after their first meeting. Something similar probably happened in Victor's timeline as a kid, as I said in a previous video. And that dead body that was in the secret room in the root cellar could have been the person who came before Elgin in the same role as Elgin in a past life, perhaps. Maybe this is how it ends for Elgin. He ends up being murdered by that entity that Fatima is birthing, which would be ironic. As for other finale predictions, I think that Jade will continue to work with Tabitha, and he will decipher the numbers from the bottles. And as I said in a previous video, I think he will discover that they translate to a musical composition, which she will play on the violin. Several fans of the show came to that conclusion, and Tony Teflon was one of the creators who discussed this in a video. I think that the act of playing this song, once Jade deciphers it, could summon a vision or an entity that will shed new light on the history of this place, or perhaps the roles that Jade and Tabitha need to play in their missions. And of course, in the finale, Tabitha will have to process the mind-blowing revelation that she was Miranda in a past life, in my opinion, after Miranda's memories came back to her at the end of episode 9 and she saw how Miranda lost her life. Also, we need the finale to finally pay off what they've been teasing all season about what has been knocking around at the cabins. We saw scenes involving this 3 times now, and they need to give us something. There must still be some consequences for Jade taking apart the totem tower, and I still believe that he unleashed some evil entity in doing so, unwittingly. And let's not forget that Tabitha had a recurring nightmare about being in that vicinity as a young girl, and she saw something that descended on her in the daytime that made her scream. This must be one of the entities worse than the monsters that Abby voice in Sara's head told Boyd about in the forest back in season 1. Now, I want to know what you think. What do you think will happen to Fatima in the finale, and what kind of entity could she be birthing? What is in the hatch, and what's the point of it being there in that secret room? Who or what do you think is out near the cabins, and will we find out in the finale? Also, who is on your list for likeliest to die in the finale, and what are your other predictions? Let me know down in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe, and until next time, keep on deep diving, and let's see what we can uncover together.